Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Preseason Reports, where we break down the strengths and weaknesses of college football stars heading into the 2017 season. I am your host, Joseph Potter. Joining me, Chris Ransom. And today, we are leading into the Draft Utopia podcast with Mr. Javon Hagan, safety out of Ohio University. And this is an intriguing prospect. He is a redshirt sophomore. He's coming into his second season. He wasn't a full-time player. He was a rotational safety, but he showed all the makings of being a huge star in what was a deep Ohio University safety group. Now, Hagan and I share a little bit of a common living situation. See, I am from the Athens area of Ohio University. Well, he goes to school at Ohio University. Now, I live in Jacksonville, Florida. Well, Javon Hagan is from Jacksonville, Florida. And I can tell you, when the interview comes up today, I'm going to have a lot of questions. It's going to feel like home. The entire situation is a very fun one. And so I'm going to get right into it. We're going to look at his pros right now that I've been able to dig up and his mentality. He's a hard hitter. MAC championship game, he laid out a receiver. It wasn't even... Yeah, it was a nasty hit, but he led with the shoulder, didn't lead with his head. I forget whether there was a penalty for defenseless receiver, but he was dislodging the ball, so at the same time, yeah, you could say it was a very good play on the ball. Now, you can also take a look at he has good hip movement. He gets around quickly, he eyes the ball quickly, he's very good when it comes to getting to the football. He's good at playing the football in the air. And he does at times have a little bit of trouble trying to figure out whether he wants to dislodge the ball or go after the ball. And at this point in his career, being that young, that's a good indecision to have because he's got time to sort out what exactly he wants to do when the ball's in the air, where he's more comfortable. So I'm not concerned about that. I think it's a good problem to have at this point because it's an easy one to really look at and figure out once you get more comfortable at the position, get more playing time, figure out what you want to do in those situations. Gotta love his size. 6'1", 211 pounds. He can play free safety. He can play strong safety. He's very versatile in the dual safety role. And so I think with those 5 strengths, even though one's a bit of a strength-weakness, and remember, he's only played, 10 games so far in his collegiate career, so he's got a lot of room to grow. His potential is off the charts. And the problems I have seen, however, he's not a natural knee bender in his back pedal. Now, this, once again, he has time to work on it. It's going to take work because he doesn't seem like he's a natural at it. But at the same time, he can work with it. He's got time. He's got an excellent coach. Love his coach. And so You know his coach is going to get him in there and really work with him on those things. He's not a great tackler. I mean, I've seen him make some good tackles, but he doesn't wrap up well. At least not nearly as well as I would like him to. A lot of times he'll lead with the shoulder. He's actually missed a couple tackles because he tried to get a hit out of bounds rather than wrapping and taking out of bounds. And from the limited game tape that we have on him at this point, those are the big things that have stood out. And I mean, we're going to get more tape as the season goes along, but he's also conducted himself well in interviews. He's conducted himself as he's seen as a hard worker in practice, and he doesn't seem like he's a troublemaker, which for the Ohio University area, if you're not a troublemaker of some kind, that's spectacular. I mean, that's not a knock on that area. Hey, I live that lifestyle. I can't say anything bad about it. But for somebody who is part of a budding culture that it's almost a budding subculture in the middle of a hippie oasis. So that is excellent that he is able to stay out of those situations. Chris, what do you think about Javon Hagan?
Javon Hagan does everything well on tape. I just feel like he's more of a two-down player than a three-down player. And I kind of noticed that when watching some of his clips because I watched 4 full games of him. I saw the Tennessee game. I saw the Dollar General Bowl. I saw his game against Western Michigan. And I think I saw one other game involving the Ohio Bobcats on tape. And the thing I noticed is he was only in on part of the plays. In fact, I had to fast forward through some of the plays on defense before I could find him in the game. But when he was in, he made plays. And this makes Hagan an extremely difficult prospect to evaluate because on one end of the spectrum, I think he has the potential to be this year's Malik Hooker. And on the other end of the spectrum, if he doesn't play 3 downs this year, he could return in 2018, get his degree, and establish himself as the top safety in the 2019 NFL Draft, which I think is a little bit more of a realistic goal when you consider Derwin James and Armani Watt are in this year's draft, whereas the 2019 draft has a guy from Washington who's just really slow at safety, played with Buda Baker, but is considered a first-round guy in the top 20, and then there's the Minnesota safety, Antoine Winfield Jr., who is the son of Antoine Winfield. And I honestly think Javon Hagan has a better chance to get picked in that class as the first safety than he does this year. But maybe that's just me. I want to see him picked in the first round. I think he has a shot to pull it off. But at the same time, there are some things on tape that he needs to tweak. Doesn't really have a specific weakness, but there's minor areas in his game where he needs to modify that and tweak that. And if he can tweak that in the next 2 years, I think he has a real shot of going in the first round.
Yeah, and I mean, to get to your point on being a two-down back, I can tell where you can see it. As I stated earlier, you know, Ohio University last year, they were deep at safety. They were running 4 safeties along through that defense. It was a rotational thing. And for a redshirt freshman, that is something I believe will help him in the future because he didn't have to come in there and be this big imposing figure. He was allowed to go in, take his lumps, as we saw in the Texas State game where he had a forced fumble but did nothing else of note. The Miami of Ohio game where he had 2 tackles and an interception. And then so forth, he had a lot of 3-tackle games. But then he had those games where what we saw comes out where he had 6 tackles and 2 forced fumbles against Tennessee, where he had the game against Gardner-Webb where he had 7 tackles, where he had the 9 tackles against Bowling Green with a forced fumble and an interception. So you can see the talent. You can see where it's coming from, but you can also see the inconsistency of a young player. You can see somebody who is still learning the college game. And that's something, because you have to look at, he's a ball hawk. Now, I'm going to total these up for you. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 forced fumbles. 1, 2, 3 interceptions. 2 of those interceptions, you can tell the athleticism. He took 2 of them back for 60 yards. The guy...
I got, on CFB stats, I got 8 deflections for breakups, 6 forced fumbles, and 3 interceptions as a redshirt freshman, as a rotational freshman redshirt, I might add. So that's phenomenal for a rotational safety to get that many big plays on tape.
Yeah, and so I think last year he flashed, but this year he has a chance to really get into everything, and he has a chance to get in there and really make a big difference, because you got to think, Coach Frank Solich, a guy who, let's face it, Ohio, his bowl record with Ohio is 2-7. Not very good. Ohio's bowl record without him, 0-2, I believe it was. And so I'm looking at it from a standpoint of this. Frank Solich is a guy out of the old school, 72 years old. He's got a little bit of Tom Coughlin-like attitude toward him. He knows the talent that Hagan has. There is no doubt about it. He knows Hagan's got trouble with his knee bend and the back pedal. But if he can get his... The big thing with knee bend, a lot of people don't really understand, is quad strength and the loosening of the tendons in your legs. And the loosening of the tendons, getting stretched out and having the strength in your quads to hold yourself up at that position, and then coordinating so you can have the quick hip flip. So the big thing with him getting his legs under him and working with that knee bend, Frank Solich knows this. He's going to have him working on that back pedal. And he's going to have him working hard on that back pedal. He's going to have him working hard. Frank Solich, as we've seen with a lot of these defenders, before him, Ohio wasn't a very good tackling team. In fact, they were pretty bad. And now, if you look at it, well, they're a pretty good tackling team. Because, and you can see it by the NFL draft prospects they put out just this year with Basham and Brown. So, you got to think, he's going to see this young kid, going to take him, good kid, great athleticism. He's going to make sure that Hagan improves on these things.
Yeah, I have a total of 5 different players in the Ohio Bobcats in my top 233, and Hagan's the one player that stands out, but they also have 2 players in the offensive line, Jake Cruz at center, Darrell Wood at guard, along with Quentin Pauling and Chad Moore, 2 linebackers that played next to Blair Brown at the Mike and the Sam roles. And then you've got another, and then I think Ohio might have one more safety that's a senior this year. But the point is the Ohio Bobcats are absolutely stacked on defense.
Yeah, and what you had last year, you had a junior safety that's going to be a senior this year. I don't I don't have his name. I don't have
I
either of the
think I
guys'
can get
names.
you his name though, because
Oh yeah.
I think he liked the tweet when I called Hagan this year's Malik Hooker. He liked the tweet as well, and I'm pretty
Yeah.
certain he was a senior safety. So, because I looked him up, I can try to get that info for you now. I'm on Ohio's website.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm on ESPN right now, just going through some stats and information on Hagan, so I'm not in that area. But they've got a sophomore safety, I believe, that's coming back. He's going to be a junior this year. You got a senior that has come back. You have the entire
Seth Myers, that 6'3", 222-pound junior redshirt safety. I think that's the sophomore safety you're referring to that's coming back.
I think so. And remember, those were the two guys that started last year, and they played a lot of the snaps, and they were a very good safety duo, but they weren't great against the pass. They were good against the pass, but they weren't as good over the top. And I'm sure that that'll be rectified, and that's where Hagan really came in, because Hagan was good over the top. And so that really helped, and they were very complementary to each other, because especially when I don't recall how often, because I only saw a couple games, all three of them were on the field at the same time, but they complemented each other very well. The other guys, they were good. Yeah, the other guys were good in the intermediate. They were good for the most part on deep routes. They just couldn't hit that huge. They couldn't get over the top on that huge home run ball. And that's where Hagan came in. So, I mean, they all did a phenomenal job with what they did. And I think that being in that situation helped Hagan, especially with those more experienced teammates coming in there, able to help him out a little bit. And so this year, not only with Hagan, but with Ohio's secondary, especially the safeties, I'm excited to see what happens, and I hope I'm able to catch a couple Ohio games without having to look them up after the fact, because these guys...
They have two senior corners and Grant Cunningham, a senior safety for depth. He was a starter, but he lost out the job to these other junior Ohio safeties in Hagan because they're that deep at safety this year. I think the Ohio Bobcats are going to win the MAC championship this year because Western Michigan's head coach is gone and he's now at Minnesota. So I think the Ohio Bobcats are going to win the MAC this year. That's my prediction for the MAC. They'll beat Western Michigan in a rematch of last year's title.
Yeah, and I wasn't happy about them losing last year.
USC win out, and then they lose to Ohio in the MAC championship.
Yeah, and I wasn't happy about Ohio losing last year. Let me tell you, that was not a good day for me. So,
I mean, last year they had a deep team too. Zach Terrell, Corey Davis, Taylor Moton, Okorafor, the left tackle who beat out Moton for the left tackle job. Western Michigan had a very deep team offensively last year. They're not going to have that. Terrell's gone. Davis is in the NFL. Okorafor's the only returning piece on offense, and I think the door's open for the Ohio Bobcats to take control of the MAC, even without Basham. They just have a lot of pieces in place. Two linebackers back. They're still deep in the secondary. If the other guys on the defensive line can step up, I think they can win the MAC. It's definitely the window of opportunity is definitely there, Joey.
yeah, and the thing that I noticed they've really got to improve the quarterback play, and because that was a point of contention, especially you saw the MAC championship game, I'm sure, and it was just these guys on defense are good, but there's if you're out there for such a long period of time, you're going to get tired. You're going to give up plays. I mean, you can't stop everybody on every play all of the time. So that's something that they're going to have to improve on. But defensively, I believe defensively, Ohio University is going to be the best defensive team in the MAC. I believe that they're going to be the best, one of the better defensive teams in that part of the country, but can their offense keep up?
Well, A.J. Ouellette had a season-ending injury in 2016 after leading Ohio in rushing yards as a sophomore, and he's coming back. So A.J. Ouellette could have a huge year. He's the team captain on the Ohio Bobcats offense, A.J. Ouellette.
Yeah,
He's coming back from an injury. So if he's healthy and this offensive line and the interior offensive line can open things up, Ouellette can take pressure off their quarterback too.
Yeah, and
I know Thomas Coburn's a huge A.J. Ouellette fan.
And Ouellette is, Ohio has always been traditionally a running team. They like to establish, and that's just not the team itself, that's the culture in Southeast Ohio. It's like, we're going to hit you, we're going to pound it down your throat, we're going to make you hurt. We may not beat you, but we're going to beat you up. And that goes with the running game as well. It's in high school, a lot of teams literally get to the state playoffs and win games in the state playoffs simply by having a running game that beats you down to where you can't compete anymore. So
their mentality is, we're not going to win, but we're going to compete our rear ends off and mess you up in the process.
Yeah, we're going out to win, but even if we don't, you're going to be hurting. Just look at the Tennessee game last year. Yeah, Tennessee won 28-19. What did they suffer for winning? And that's the mentality. They're tough. They are tough. They have a coach that just fits perfect with that culture. And it's a culture that works in football. We're tougher than you. We're going to hit you harder. We're going to come at you. We're not going to stop. And you're going to have to stop us. And that's defensively and offensively. And that is a system that has traditionally worked in football. And that's what Ohio does. And that's why, a lot of ways, I think Javon Hagan's a perfect fit for Ohio, because he is a lot like that. He's just not as refined as somebody with more experience would be.
And I think Ohio can refine him this year. And on that note, I'm going to get off the call. If you want to continue this talk about Hagan, we can on Draft Utopia, but I need to call into my podcast because that's going to start at the top of the hour, and we're going to have Hagan on at 11 today. So thanks for having me on, Joey.
Not a problem, Chris. And ladies and gentlemen, that was Chris Ransom of Draft Utopia, and he brought up some really good points, and I think we've had a really good discussion leading into the Javon Hagan interview on the Draft Utopia podcast at 11 o'clock. And one thing you really need to think about is Hagan presents himself well. He's athletic. He's smart. You can tell by the interviews he's very intelligent when it comes to being a football player. And not only that, But when you really look at what's happening from a standpoint in Ohio, when you have Frank Solich as their coach, old school guy, just goes in, tough as nails, going into a tough as nails area. He's been there 12 years. I believe this is going to be his 13th season. You're looking at a guy with as much athleticism and as much natural raw ability as you have in Javon Hagan. And I can tell you, this year is going to be a big one for Hagan. And if he, which is more than likely positive, he's going to come back for another year. Next year, we could be right back here doing a preseason report on Hagan, and we could be saying this is the best safety in college football in 2018. So look out for Hagan. Look out for the Ohio Bobcats, because this could be a very good season, and this could be a coming out party for not only Hagan, but it could be a year that the Ohio University Bobcats end up as the not only MAC champions, but put the country on notice. So, thank you everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Chris Ransom, for coming on. This is Joseph Potter. Join us here over for the Draft Utopia podcast on TalkShoe as we prepare to interview Ohio University safety Javon Hagan. And thank you, and have a good day.